Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm so fired up tonight because not only do I have my co-host and Hall of Famer and recent birthday boy, Steve Flink, with me on tonight, but we are also joined by one of our favorite commentators. He's on the Tennis Channel. It is an absolute privilege for me to have this guest on with us tonight. Please welcome to the pod, Steve Weissman. Steve, thank you for joining Steve Flink and myself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to join the legend, as I call him, Steve Flink, and you. Thanks for asking me to come on, and looking forward to it.
Hey, we love the work that you do, and I know if you go back to the history of when my podcast really started, I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of college coaches as guests, and I know you felt so highly of what was going down. The level of play down in Lake Nona during the NCAA championships. I mean, such poise from 18 to 22-year-olds. On the girls' side, it was two freshmen. Match was tied 3-3 going for the whole thing. I mean, how impressive was that?
No, it's awesome. I'm actually the volunteer assistant coach at Loyola Marymount at LMU here in LA. So, I follow college tennis very closely. That final, I know Emma because of covering the Charleston event for a while, and her dad Ben has been fantastic for the Volvo Car Open, and I've gotten to get to know Emma a little bit. She's awesome, and I know Stella because I covered her win when she won the Malibu Masters, the Oracle Masters at the Malibu Racket Club a few years ago, and have stayed friends with her. So it was cool to see them both play, and obviously Stella had beaten her earlier in the year. That was Emma's only loss, and then for Emma as a freshman to be able to win the title is pretty special. So, I mean, the level of play, college tennis, I'm a huge proponent of college tennis, both on the men's and the women's side. And as we've seen, at the pros, it's a great springboard to success. I mean, what Jen Brady's doing right now is amazing. And obviously she played 3 singles at UCLA. I mean, she wasn't even the top player, and now she's, top 15 in the world. So
Well, thank
it's
you.
pretty cool.
Thank you for using your platform to not only speak so highly of it and promote college tennis, because like you said, the level is so good and it's so much fun. Before we dive into your background and a little bit of your career journey, I know we're going to talk Wimbledon later on in this podcast, but I want to hear your thoughts. Steve and I obviously talked a lot a bit about it, but the run by Novak, especially that third set, against Rafa, and then obviously his come from behind victory against Stefanos Tsitsipas. That was remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, beating Rafa was the big deal. That third set, arguably the greatest set ever. I mean, that level was insane. I mean, I've gotten to see some good tennis, but that was next level. I mean, it took like the 5th winner of a point to actually decide it. I mean, it was video game stuff. I'd never seen anything like it. And for him to beat Rafa on that court, in that venue, where he's won 13 times. I mean, listen, it had only been done twice before. He was one of the guys that had done it. And for him to do it, 2 times, we always talk about the GOAT conversation, and I don't think it should be decided until everybody's done playing. But that's a big box to check off there for Djokovic. And to be the only guy in the open era now to win twice at every single major. I mean, that's massive to me. The fact that Roger and Rafa have not done that. And so to get past Rafa and then, do what he did against Tsitsipas, come back from 2 sets down where it never felt like he was out of it. He's that guy that I always say, I mean, 3 out of 5 is just a different ballgame. I mean, 3 out of 5 against Rafa and Clay is the toughest still, even though Djokovic beat him. In my opinion, still the toughest thing to do in all of sports. It's now only been done a few times, but for him to, beat Tsitsipas, that's what he does. He just wears you out both physically and mentally, and that's what makes him the favorite heading into Wimbledon. And that's why people are talking about a Grand Slam and a Golden Slam. It's not going to be easy at all, but he's certainly the favorite at all those events. And, it starts on Monday.
Yeah, I'll let Steve Flink add a couple thoughts in there. We differentiated between maybe the Djokovic-Rafa match was not nearly one of the greatest matches they've played, but
Totally.
That third set was fantastic, right, Steve? I mean, the best maybe set you've ever seen.
Yeah, totally agree with Steve's assessment of the third set. But I do believe, Steve, that what happened was we all were so caught up in the glow of that third set because it was the centerpiece of the match and it took 91 minutes and it was really what decided the outcome of the match in the end, that I look back on it and say, okay, fantastic set, best set they've ever played against each other for sure. But the first set they were both a little tight, I thought, and 5-love lead for Rafa, and back comes Novak to make a go, which I thought was important again in deciding the outcome, was that he made the first set tight. Then a good second set, a spectacular third, and then Rafa did fade a bit in the fourth while Djokovic was magnificent. So all in all, a very good match, even a great match, but just measured to me up against their other epics like Australia 2012, 5 hours and 53-minute final, and the Wimbledon semi of 18 and the French semi of 13. They've just had so many gems that to me from beginning to end were better than this, but there's not been anything. That's where I'm completely in accord with Steve W, is that nothing to equal that third set, which I think they'll both remember for the rest of their lives. And then good point by Steve about it is the first time in the Open era, because Laver did it twice, but one of those was in the amateurs in 62. The second was in 69 as a second year of Open tennis. And I think that the other thing that Djokovic did that hadn't been done since 49 was to come back from 2 sets to love down twice to win a major. The last one who'd done it was Ted Schroeder at Wimbledon in 49. So all of these things, he will tell his grandchildren about this someday, because I think he does, Steve, I think you probably agree with me. I think he does have a good, clear sense of history.
No, yeah. I mean, he certainly does. And I totally agree with you. It was not the greatest match of all time or anything close to that. It was just that set and the moment and being able to get past him. But no, I mean, he wants to end with the most Grand Slam titles. He wants to end with all the records. And right now, I mean, head to head, he leads Rafa. Head to head, he leads Roger. He's one away from tying in terms of Grand Slams. He's got those nuggets in terms of the only guy who's won all the Masters 1000s a couple of times, all the Grand Slams a couple of times, the most Masters 1000s. There's not a lot that he doesn't have. So, the Olympics will be important for him as well. I think that means a lot to play for his country. I mean, I think back in Rio, 5 years ago now, I was able to call those matches, and that was devastating to him. I mean, he was in tears on the court when he lost.
I'll never forget seeing him walk off the court after the loss to Delpo, and absolutely could not fight the tears back, because, I mean, he had won the first 2 majors of the year. Granted, he had lost at Wimbledon by then to Querrey, but he was still, I think, confident going into the Olympics, and that was what he felt was a golden opportunity loss and a very tough draw against Delpo. But you're right, and that's going to be one of the interesting things, Steve, about this coming summer, is if Djokovic does win Wimbledon and has the 3rd straight major, does he then still go to the Olympics, knowing that could jeopardize, his chances of winning in New York? He wants that gold medal so badly, but does he want it more than he wants the Grand Slam? Or, I mean, would he forego the Golden Slam to get the Grand Slam? That's what I'm wondering.
I think he would. I don't think he will not go to the Olympics. So if you just laid it out in terms of, if I'll give you a Grand Slam right now, but no Golden Slam, he would take the Grand Slam, right? I mean, that hasn't been done since Steffi. That said, with the opportunity and being healthy, I don't think he would not go to the Olympics just to play the U.S. Open. So I think he'll do it all.
I do think it's going to be a discussion in his camp, Steve. I see your point of view and I understand it, but I think that the people around him like Vida and Ivanisevic and his parents, whoever's opinions he values highly, will weigh in and want him to think about not going to the Olympics, because ultimately, is that going to mean, it'll mean a lot to him personally if he can get the gold medal. But if it's such a tough physical challenge and he is trying to pick his spots more, it's not going to be an easy decision by any means.
No, you're right. The thing is,
it'll all change if he doesn't win Wimbledon too. That will throw a whole other.
Of course, if he doesn't win Wimbledon, then I think he just goes. Period. No choice. But I'm putting this on the basis of winning Wimbledon. But Steve, you were going to say something. Sorry.
Well, I mean, he's won the U.S. Open multiple times, so that is something that he has. Obviously, the Grand Slam is the Grand Slam, but But he doesn't have the Olympics. So in terms of GOAT conversations, he doesn't need to win a Grand Slam to be the GOAT over Roger and Rafa, in my opinion, if he has all the other accolades and more majors and more everything else and the head-to-head, because neither of them won a Grand Slam, right? So we're talking a long time ago since that's happened. He had a gold medal. Now he's literally done everything. Plus, he, in my opinion, if he stays healthy, will add more majors.
It's all crazy. It's all crazy. We're all privileged to see it.
Here's the thing: if he were to win Wimbledon, that's he didn't get there in 16 when he had the first two. He does it this time. It's like he surely knows at 34 he's not going to get that opportunity. That's not coming back again. That chance to go to New York and win the Grand Slam. So I think all of
you don't think? You don't think next year?
No, I mean, I think he's going to do great next year, but I don't think he can expect to be winning the first three of the season. I think that's unlikely, as great as he is. And he gets two maybe, but I just think that all of these things will be swirling around his mind. It's a nice problem to have, right, Steve?
Totally.
We're just so privileged to see it all. Before we get into a little bit more about Wimbledon and what we'll consider some, quick hitter type questions for both of you, I want to, with Steve Weissman as our guest, I want to talk to you, ask you how it all started. We know about your work at ESPN, Tennis, NFL Live, but if you can kind of take us back, how'd you get into the love of sports? And I know you went to Northwestern, which is 25 miles away from where I currently reside. And I know how much you love the Cats, as you always say on Twitter.
Right. Go Cats.
Bring us back to where it all started, I guess.
Well, it all started in Washington, D.C., Silver Spring, Maryland. That's where I grew up. And my mom will say I learned how to read by reading the sports page of the Washington Post. So I grew up reading Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser before they were, TV stars. They were the columnists at the Washington Post. And I would read the sports section front to back and knew every single statistic. And then I started playing basketball, I think when I was 5 or 6, and then started playing tennis when I was 7 or 8. And those were my main sports. I also played soccer. I played golf. My mom would not let me play football or hockey. But football was always probably my favorite sport. I mean, at the time they were the Washington Redskins. Now they're the Washington football team, but they were my favorite team by far. I remember the first game I went to at RFK Stadium. And I grew up, going to tennis camp every summer at the Aspen Hill Club right outside Silver Spring. And that's where I trained year round. And we would go to what was the Legg Mason Tennis Classic, which is now the City Open. And I remember getting my first autograph from Andre Agassi, waiting outside a practice court. And, he signed the ticket stub, and I still have that. And I watched him. I watched the Jensen brothers. I watched, Michael Chang and Peter Korda and Jim Courier and Pete Sampras and, all those guys, Brad Gilbert when he played, in DC back in the day. And that was like a thrill every summer to go to that event and get to see those, players up close and personal. And for me, especially Agassi, because, he's my all-time, favorite from when I was little. And
well, guess who loves hearing that?
For those listeners, Steve and I had a great discussion about Pete and Andre, and you guys should all go listen to the episode. It was a little bit longer than usual, but it was such a fun episode for both Steve Flink and myself to do. As you all know, Steve Flink, his most recent project is his new book, Greatness Revisited. Pete Sampras. It's Pete Sampras, Greatness Revisited. Great book. So definitely go check it out. But yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you set it up too perfectly, Steve.
Pete's great. And obviously Paul Annacone is a dear friend of mine. It's become like family, and, but I can't lie. Growing up, I literally wrote a paper, Steve, I think it was 11th grade AP English. And it was something about the baseliner versus the serve and volleyer. And it was basically Agassi and Sampras. And, I'm more of Andre's stature, and my game is more like Andre's, and that's how I saw myself. And so, the paper got an A. Thank you, Victor Carrascio.
For you.
that was, his whole, image is everything, and the hair and the clothes and the shoes and just, Andre was everything to me. Still is.
Yeah. Well, that's
echo your thoughts, sir. Echo your thoughts.
Great that you got to, it would have been disappointing not to get an A because you obviously were pretty passionate about the topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what made you other than obviously it's a great school, was Northwestern on one of your wish lists growing up, or you just, when you were applying, you knew this was one of them, you wanted to go to Chicago maybe?
No, none of that. Actually, Stanford was my first choice, honestly, because growing up, they always had the winning national championship tennis teams. And so I was like, oh, like that's where I got to go. At some point realized I'm not good enough to play at Stanford. But then I was like, I think I'm smart enough. I mean, like I get really good grades and, all that stuff. Turns out I wasn't, or whatever, it's very hard to get in there. I did not get in there. And Northwestern was just, I applied to like 9 schools and Northwestern was one of them, and everything happens for a reason. And I honestly didn't apply. My first choice, like Stanford does not have a journalism program. I think they have a communications department, and some of the other schools that were high on my list, I would have been like an econ major. I don't think they had communication schools. So that was never a thing for me. I was never like, which of these, Missouri or Northwestern or USC or Syracuse or any of those, that I didn't care about that. So, but everything happens for a reason. I go to Northwestern to just check out the campus before committing. And I had applied to the School of Speech because they have a major called RTVF, Radio, TV, Film. And I've known since I was in 3rd grade, I wanted to be a television sports broadcaster. And I was like, well, that seems like the major I would take. When I got there, I realized RTVF is all F. It's like all film. If you want to be, great filmmakers have gone through that school. So I transferred into Medill, the journalism school, the summer before my freshman year, because I realized when I was on campus that the journalism school, broadcast journalism, is actually the major that would help me in what I wanted to do. And there was a quarter where you would go away to a TV station if you were in TV, a magazine if you were in magazine, a newspaper if you were in newspaper, and work for a quarter, literally at a real TV station. I was like, that's perfect. So that's kind of how I, ended up going there. And then for me, I joined the radio station when I was a freshman, and I knew that when I was a senior, I wanted to be sports director of the radio, WNUR Sports. And because they covered every single basketball game, home and away, every single football game, home and away, we had sponsored deal. Like we would get our own advertising. United Airlines would, give us X amount of flights, and through the athletic department, they would give us a room wherever they were staying. And we had other donors that, would help us. We literally had better gear than WGN. We'd be on the road with Dave Ennett, who's still, he's the man, he's the voice of the Wildcats. And they would be using like a phone line. We were using an ISDN line. And, but that was, the biggest experience for me was, being able to do play-by-play and travel with the women's basketball team and the football team and the men's basketball team, and call all those games. And I mean, those are some of my favorite memories from college, being like in 2000 when Northwestern won we were co-Big Ten champs, and we played Wisconsin at Camp Randall, and the game went to double overtime and we won. Like I called that when we beat Michigan 54-51. And it was, Zach Kustok and Sam Simmons, and it was just a shootout. And like I did play-by-play for those games, and then the Alamo Bowl that year when we got crushed by Nebraska. But though, that was the best experience for me. Now they have this insane broadcast building, and they do television stuff every night. At the time, it was like once a week. It was the NNN, the Northwestern News Network. So that's where I got my experience on the radio. And then, I sent out back then VHS tapes. So you had your reel was a VHS tape, and then I'd have a cover letter, and I would go on this website called tvjobs.com, and I would see openings pop up, and I would send a cover letter and a tape, and normally hear nothing. And like at that point, I was just like begging for somebody to be like, "You're horrible. Like, just give me something. Like, give me feedback." but nothing. And so then this one station in Alpena, Michigan, which is the third smallest market in the country. So there's 210 television demographic markets in the United States. And the last ones are North Platte, Nebraska, Glendive, Montana, and Alpena, Michigan. And so Alpena called me. They were like, we'd like to interview you for our weekend, sports anchor position. And I rented a car because my car broke down on the way home from Chicago, rented a car, stayed with a buddy in Ann Arbor, and then, go to Alpena. It's snowing. I mean, it's freezing. There's basically a super Walmart, and that's it. And and then the station is a red pole barn, and it was wild. And I took that job for $14,000 a year. And that the toughest job is always the first one. And then I got going.
That's great. That's great. Oh, go ahead, Steve Flink.
Sorry. Two quick things. One, I want to know when tennis became such a central, because you're talking about all these sports, which obviously made you very versatile and maybe marketable as well. And then the second thing, just a brief comment about when you were reading the Washington Post and reading Kornheiser and Wilbon. Did you read the tennis writer Barry Lorge? Were there any tennis writers because Barry Lorge was a great tennis writer in that era, mainly. I know Barry was still at the Washington Post in the 70s. He may have gone to San Diego by then, but were you paying attention to the tennis writers as well as just those sports columnists? And then secondly, when did tennis really become such a deep passion for you as it clearly is right now?
So I don't remember Barry. He may not have been there in the 80s, 90s, when I was heavily reading the Post. But I read the sports section from cover to cover. So right. Whether it was tennis, football, or anything, I consumed that information. I remember watching Michael Chang in '89. It's one of my first real vivid memories of him winning the French and doing the underarm serve against Lendl. Yeah. And because I was literally at summer camp. So I was, at Aspen Hill watching all these matches. And so for me, tennis, I was most proficient at tennis. At some point I stopped growing. Basketball, people passed me. But at tennis, I was still really good. I played number one singles in high school, my junior and senior year. I went to a pretty big public high school. And like I said, I trained year round for that. So I played tennis all the time. I spent my days were at the Aspen Hill Club, whether it was playing tennis, whether it was, it was also a training center. So I did a lot of, physical stuff there. They also had a basketball court. So a lot of my friends from high school, we would all play pickup hoops there, but I was always there. And tennis was, what I loved and what I was really good at. And so, ever since middle school, I would say, when I started playing tournaments, I remember playing my first futures tournament, and then I would play USTA events, and I was ranked in Maryland. I was never, like I said, I wasn't good enough to play at Stanford. I was not good enough to play at Northwestern. But to this day, I played yesterday. I love playing, and I'll hit for 3 hours rather than run on the treadmill for 20 minutes.
100%. We're gonna ask how good you are later on too. I have a fun question for you later on, but yeah, no, I'm with you too. I hate cardio. I can't run on a treadmill, but I could play for 3 hours. I'd much rather do that. So
yeah, but David, I remember talking to Steve. I was making one of my appearances on Tennis Channel, being interviewed by him, which is one of the easiest things you could ever do. If you ever want to be interviewed by somebody, let Steve Weissman do it, because I don't care how nervous you might be going in. You're not nervous it's one of your great traits, Steve. But
that's very kind. Thank you.
Remember, we were talking off air, and you were telling me, and this was early in the pandemic, and you were playing on somebody's private court. And I thought, wow, nothing stopping him. And this was early on, David, and he was still finding a way to stay safe, but to play tennis.
Well, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that later. I don't want to dive too deep into it yet, but one of the interesting things I want to ask you about, Steve Weissman, is, you got the NFL Live and the tennis coverage. There's not too many guys that do both. Chris Fowler does a great job with college football, and then obviously his tennis coverage on ESPN. But the NFL and the tennis, there's not too many guys out there that do both those sports. How did that kind of come about?
Well, I mean, obviously when I was at ESPN for a little over 5 years, and I covered everything there. I mean, my main gig was SportsCenter. So when you're on SportsCenter, you need to be an expert on everything from NASCAR to the NHL to golf to tennis to football to, basketball, every single baseball. So because you're doing a segment, with Barry Melrose, and then you're literally shifting to Ricky Craven, then you're shifting to Antonio Davis and Tim Legler. And so, I mean, you must be an expert in everything. Now I only need to be an expert in two things. So it's honestly a lot easier. But, I've always loved both sports. Like I said, the Washington football team growing up, like that was my every Sunday, that was appointment viewing. My emotions went up and down based on their wins and losses. And then tennis is just, it's been my life, for decades. And so when I left ESPN, Mark Woodford, who you both, know well, the Hall of Famer, was one of the first analysts I worked with at ESPN. So when I was at ESPN, I also was blessed enough to be able to do the majors for DirecTV, like the Mosaic coverage. I did the US Open like 5 times, the Australian Open 4 or 5 times, Wimbledon 3 or 4 times. We did not do Roland Garros. And so Woody was one of the first analysts. Woody, Chanda Rubin were a couple of the first analysts I ever worked with at ESPN. Murphy Jensen, Luke Jensen.
What years were these that you did
so
those?
Starting 2011.
Okay.
First US Open.
Yeah.
And so we would call matches together, and tennis, I truly believe, is a family. Like it's been so good to me. Everybody that I've come in contact with has played an integral role in where I'm at right now. And so when I left ESPN, Woody and his wife and his 2 daughters, they're like family. And they were just here, and we had dinner in LA recently. And so he was like, why don't you come? They live in Indian Wells. And so he's like, why don't you come stay with us during Indian Wells? I'll get you a gig with BBC Radio. And then you can just, hang out, have like a little time off. And so I knew somebody at Tennis Channel that had worked at ESPN. And so I sent an email and I was just like, hey, I'm going to be at Indian Wells. If you all have time to meet, obviously I did a lot of tennis at ESPN. That'd be great. And so I got off the plane at LAX, drove to the site, and Bob Wiley, who's now, my boss at Tennis Channel, was like, hey, I can't meet with you right now, but how about you call the first 2 days of matches for us as like a paid audition? I was like, amazing. So I ended up, my first match that I called and was Marty Fish's comeback against Ryan Harrison. It was the first round. It was, 2015. And I had gotten to know Marty pretty well through good friends from ESPN. And so I was like, this is amazing. Like, I know Marty, and I worked with Jim Courier and Lindsay Davenport. And obviously I was staying at Woody's house. And so one, like, that was, so kind of him and his family to have me there. But two, like, when I meet Jim and Lindsay for the first time, they kind of, they're like, oh, you're staying at the Woodies, like, you must be okay, like. And so it was kind of like that, where they really, accepted me right away. And then I called the next day, I think Sloane Stephens match, and it turned out that they liked what I did. And so, and then I was also doing this BBC radio stuff, which was fun. And so it turned into an intense work week, which totally fine. And then Tennis Channel offered me to fly me out to LA to do the Miami Open, which was coming up later. And I did that. And so there was no contract at that point. It was just, they liked working with me, and I liked working with them. And so they would fly me out for events. And so in the middle of all that, I got an audition at NFL Network, April 7th, 2015, flew out to LA, did the audition, and then they hired me to host their morning show starting in July of 2015. So basically, they put me up at a hotel, the Marriott in Marina Del Rey, from July of 2015 until October of 2015. I was hosting their morning show Monday through Friday. It's called NFL HQ. Awesome show. Worked with LeVar Arrington, Aaron Coscarelli, Daniel Jeremiah, Michael Fabiano, Elliot Harrison, Rand Getlin. It was an awesome crew. And so I would get up at midnight, go to work at 1 a.m., do this morning show. And then I left because Tennis Channel wanted me to do the City Open that year. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, to be able to come home and broadcast, my home event, the one I grew up going to, Agassi. And that was one of the greatest thrills. And so I did that for a week, flew back to LA, back to the morning show. Then I left to do the US Open, actually for ESPN, because those, like Don Colantonio is another guy who led that, like basically the DirecTV stuff, and gave me my first opportunity in national tennis. And so I owe DC a lot. But and then I came back to do the NFL stuff. And then at some point I was still living in Connecticut, but there was nothing for me in Connecticut. And so all of my gigs were in LA. And so I made the decision to move myself to LA. And I was like, whatever happens, if I'm just on the beach for two months doing nothing, I'm just going to be happy. I truly love LA. I love the beach. The South Bay is where I live, and it's paradise to me. I watch the sunset over the Pacific Ocean every night, and it never gets old. Like, I've been here over 5 years. It doesn't get old. And so I didn't have any contracts or anything, but I knew that there's probably going to be some work. So the day I got back here, I moved here December 10th, 2015. NFL Network was like, oh, he's actually living here. We'll give him work. And so December 11th, I was back at NFL Network, and I've been there ever since. And I've gotten opportunities to do NFL Now, and I've done a lot of Total Access recently, and NFL Game Day Live during the season, and it's been a blast. And I love working with that group. And then Tennis Channel, signed me to a contract, and now we've had multiple deals since then, and it's just kind of grown. And like I said, they're a family, and from the top down, from Ken Solomon to Bob Wiley and Ross Schneiderman, and it's just, they're awesome. It's such a pleasure to it's called work, but like Lindsay and Jim and Paul and everybody I work with are, I had Thanksgiving at the Anacones a couple of years ago, and stayed with Lindsay and her family in Hawaii. And it's such a pleasure to, kind of do what I love with people that I love. And so I'm very grateful for the position that I'm in right now, because I'm really, really blessed to be doing this stuff.
Amazing. Yeah, no. And you can tell you don't take it for granted. You're extremely grateful for what you have. And it's so cool to see, because you're doing great work on both fronts. So keep it up. And I know we all love watching what you're doing. I want to be respectful for both of your time. I got a bazillion quick hitters we could do. We're not going to do them all. I'm just going to kind of mix them around. So we did this, Steve Flink and myself did this with Mary Carrillo a couple months ago, and we had a blast doing it. So I'm sure it'll be the same thing here. So let me start. This question is only for Steve Weissman.
Okay? Can I give you one? I got one more anecdote. I apologize for cutting you off, because that's rude, but you bring up
that's
Mary
okay.
Carrillo,
they want to hear from you.
So that first Indian Wells in 2015, I wrote out, I love to write, and that's a big, part of broadcasting. Like, we write our own stuff. I think people think sometimes that somebody else is out there writing. Like, if you watched Roland Garros, and I came on every day, and there was like 20 seconds of Paris, my biggest challenge was to talk about Paris in 16 different new and interesting ways. But I love that. Like, I truly enjoy the writing aspect. So that first match that I called Marty Fish's match against Ryan Harrison, I wrote this, 30-second intro about him coming back. And at the conclusion, Mary Carrillo is in the broadcast, but she's not calling that match, but she's in there. She comes over. I don't even know if I had met her yet, but like Mary, kind of like you, Steve, like she's a legend. Like, and so she comes over and she kisses the top of my head. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, that's like, like hosting SportsCenter with Stuart Scott. We'll never forget it. Like, one of the coolest things of all time. But like Mary Carrillo accepting me and giving me that, it was like, it was like her approval, or more than approval. Like, I was like, oh my, like I got like goosebumps even like right now talking about it. Because I
So
have such
friendly.
respect for
So
Mary
friendly.
and think she's
so
amazing.
friendly.
So, but anyway, that was just a little anecdote.
No, that's
Well,
okay. So
I have to say, I'm not surprised by that anecdote, knowing her as long as I have. It goes back really to '77 and seeing her win that French.
Yeah.
I did not see her win that French Open mix, but I saw her at Wimbledon that year. So I've known her really since that year and known her well since the early '80s, and that's very typical of her spirit and generosity that she would greet you that way, and totally genuine.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's the reason. I mean, probably the biggest reason why I was able to do the Olympics in 2016. You know, because she was like, "You should hire Steve." You know, and like she carries that weight. So super grateful to now be friends with Mary as well.
no, she's and so friendly, and I was so fortunate. I was so happy to have her on with Steve a couple months ago. We had so much fun, and she's
Hilarious.
like you said,
Like also like
so genuine.
I'm like laughing the entire time I'm ever with Mary.
That's
Like,
what I said in the end of the pod, right, Steve? I said I don't think I stopped smiling or laughing for the 50 minutes that we did it.
Incredible personality.
Yeah, she is. Okay, here's the question I wanted to ask, and I've heard you talk about it with Mark Lucero, who's also been a guest on our pod. But
Yep.
the best of the non-pros at the Tennis Channel on air, and I've heard you hit with, I believe it was Shonda Rubin, I believe. The best non-pros at Tennis Channel. Are you take the cake? Are you the best one on there by far?
No, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, Chanda, by the way, I've hit with a couple times recently, and I mean, she's former number 6 in the world, Grand Slam champion. I've hit with Lindsay, Tracy. I mean,
Those are pros, though.
That's
you're
the
not
coolest thing for me. And all fair, I do want like a lot of Tennis Channel is people that love and are passionate about tennis. I mean, Cale Hammond, who does a lot of our betting stuff, he played tennis at Duke. Mimi Fotopoulos, who, if you need anything done at Tennis Channel, she gets it done. She played tennis at Oklahoma. Natalia Munoz, who just started as a PA, she played tennis at Long Beach State. So
also a guest on the pod. She's great. She's great.
Okay, yeah. So yes, I mean, like the people that work at Tennis Channel loved. I mean, Jimmy Connor's son Brett, is one of our guys that has worked there ever since I've been there, and I think he's actually really. I know he's great at golf and he loves playing golf, but I'm pretty sure he's good at tennis as well. I've only of on-air people that aren't pros. I think the only one that I've hit with is Ari Wolf, and he's very good. But I can't. I've heard that Russ is pretty good, and that's
All right, Steve Flink. We're not
No.
banking the title on him.
Did we not get the answer without getting the answer just now? I think we're just hearing some Steve Weissman modesty because he was very nice to everybody else and very understated about his own talent. But I think having heard the background of it a few minutes ago, we can safely say that Steve might stand out in that category.
I mean, I've always talked with Tracy about having some sort of tournament, during the off, like in December or something like that, and having everybody kind of play like a, king of the court doubles sort of situation.
That'd be fun. A non-pro with a pro. Pair a non-pro with a pro.
Exactly. That would be a blast.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. I'll leave this to both of you. Steve Flink, we'll start with you. First thing that comes to mind. Roger's chances at Wimbledon, Serena's chances at Wimbledon.
Well, it's funny. I've seen a couple of the people on websites. Then Steve Tignu, who I greatly respect, picked Roger to win. A few people have. I think it's a long shot. I think that he hasn't shown us that much so far this year. On the other hand, you have this incredible collection of historical greatness on those grounds from Roger. So the question is, does he, having played 4 tournaments this year, and does he then suddenly find the magic the first week that carries him into the second week that makes him dangerous? I think the likelihood is he goes to the 16 or quarters. I'd be really surprised if he won this tournament. If he does, it would probably be the single greatest accomplishment of his career, given that he's on the edge of being 40 and given that he's come off these 2 knee surgeries last year and was gone for over a year. So I think it's fascinating. Serena, I would say, much better chance. I still don't pick her to win the tournament, but on the other hand, having been, I've seen some signs despite what happened in Roland Garros. So I kind of feel like there's an outside shot for Serena, which is greater than Rogers. What do you think, Steve?
You make great points, and I do agree that this would probably be the greatest accomplishment of Federer's career. If he's able to do this now after the knee surgeries, where he's at, the lack of play. The thing with me and GOATs and greatness, I never bet against them, right? Because the reason that they are among the greatest of all time is because they can accomplish things that mere mortals cannot. So if Federer won, if Serena won, it would not surprise me. It would not surprise me if they didn't win as well. But I would never say that arguably the two of the greatest players in the history of the planet won't win, because why not? I mean, like that's why they're great, because they do things that we don't expect them to do. When Roger came back in 2017, nobody expected anything from him. What does he do? He wins the Australian Open and Wimbledon.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was great. And I no doubt that now that in that case, he also came off a knee surgery, gone 6 months. I think what maybe helped there though was that everybody else had their little off season leading into the Australian, left some of it's always a little hard to get going at the start of the year. And Roger survived a couple of tough 5-setters with Nishikori and Wawrinka, and then amazingly beat Rafa from 3-1 down in the fifth, never lost another game. So that was, you're right. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there's no way. I'm saying high, to me, I see it as certainly highly unlikely, and it would be a stupendous achievement. But Serena, do you agree with me about Serena? Would you rate her chances higher than Rogers?
Yeah, I would. I think she's got a really tough draw, though. I mean, you look, there's no easy matches from Sasnovich to potentially Bernarda Pera, Kerber, who's coming off of a win, Bencic, who loves to play on grass, Svitolina, Barty, and then Sabalenka. I mean, I don't think Sabalenka's getting to the final, but she's never even made a quarterfinal. And it never works out that way, right? I mean, all these projected draws never work out that way. But
but Steve, also you left out, those are all the people she's projected to play, but she might end up having to play Coco too, which is the one that I really want to say that. I would love that, because Coco would go out there fearlessly, and yet Serena's got her deep pride, and I would love to see that match.
It's a potential fourth round. I'm looking at it now. A potential fourth round match.
Exactly. And Kerber would be in the third round. So I totally agree, Steve. The draw is tough. On the other hand, you know, she hasn't had to deal with any recent injuries, and she's been healthy, and she played some on the clay, and she was okay in Paris. So I feel like she's a little better, slightly better prepared, but it'll be fascinating to watch her.
I think it's her best chance. Of all the opportunities to get 24, I think still to this day, she gets 2 games stepping on the court against most other players. Maybe not the Grand Slam champions, but everyone else. I'm giving Serena plus 2 games just for being Serena. She needs to take advantage of those 2 games. So 1 a set, right? You're up a break, stepping on the court. That's what, in my opinion, I mean, I don't know if she feels that. I don't know if you feel that, but I still think she carries that aura. And so that's why, like, the loss to Rybakina was very disappointing, in my opinion. And that's what she has to take advantage of, because if it's straight up, I don't know if she wins. But because she's Serena, and in my opinion, she gets a game a set, I still think she can beat everyone.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the problem is that you refer to Rybakina, is that she can lose to an awful lot of people these days. It's a wider range of players that on a given day can beat her. That's what makes it interesting. But here's what I think, Steve. I look back on those 4 finals in 18 and 19. She didn't win a set, at Wimbledon and the Open. Great accomplishment to be in the Wimbledon and Open finals 2 years in a row. Gets to the semis of US Open last year and wins the first set against Azarenka, loses the match. Great on her way to the semis this year in Australia. Naomi rises to the occasion and beats her. So it's no knock. It's a lot of very impressive performances, but I guess that's where my biggest doubts are, is if Serena gets to the semis or finals, does somebody pick her off again? Who's to say? Maybe she finally relaxes a little more, because I do think she's obsessed by the history and really thinking about 24 and trying to keep it out of her mind, but not always succeeding.
All right, quick hitters. We're moving on. This is not a quick hitter right here.
Sorry.
We got to move on.
Topics. There's nuance.
Well, here's a one on a lighter note, and I have no idea how you guys are going to answer. Steve Weissman, I'll start with you. Nick Kyrgios and Venus Williams in mixed doubles.
I'm so excited. First of all, I'm just excited to have Nick back. The match against Ugo Humbert is going to be really entertaining. Nick just brings excitement. He brings something different, and he brings an audience, and I am that audience. And so yeah, the fact that he's playing with V is like next level. Like, I hope they win the whole thing. I think it's so cool that a few years ago, when asked, who she'd want to play mixed doubles with, she's like, I think Nick Kyrgios would be fun. And now they're playing together. So I'm stoked about it. I'm just really excited that Nick is back playing, because we haven't seen him since Australia.
Steve Flink.
I have nothing to add to that. I just put me down for ditto. I'm really looking forward to it. And I would say that they do have a very decent chance to win the tournament, because I think they're going to be competitive. And I think Venus is going to make Nick be serious, and he will be.
I don't think there's another mixed doubles male, correct me if I'm wrong, that is better than Kyrgios. So that, just by that, he's going to be the best player on the court every time they step on the court.
Right. I would say a name that's not even in the draw. The only other person I'd say I think he's the best doubles player on the planet is Jack Sock, and he's not in the draw. So yeah, with that in the field, pure talent wise on the doubles area, Nick Kyrgios. So it'll be fun to watch. Again, quick hitters, PTPA, the Professional Tennis Players Association. There was a lot going on this week. They had the press conference, which I saw. It was in the middle of the night, like 2 nights ago. I watched it. What are your quick thoughts? We can keep it high level, because there's a lot of things that are still a lot of questions need to be answered.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't quick, and it's not something to just throw out stuff about. I mean, I just read, Daniel Valverde just wrote this whole thing on Twitter, and then, guys responded to that. And right now, to me, it's just a lot of Twitter talk. And, something I believe that the players, they have the most power. Steve, and I want to get your opinion on this, Steve, because to me, their power is playing. So if you get everybody not to play, things will change. So if but that's really tough to do. If you don't, I don't see things changing, because the tournaments and tennis has, 8 different people ruling the game. And so they don't have a commissioner. And I think a commissioner would be great for tennis. But, when I cover the NFL, there's an NFLPA, and that union, supports the players' interests and collective bargains certain things that help the players. And so I think that would be helpful to tennis players. But ultimately, they could decide if the top, but then, Roger and Rafa aren't in agreement with Novak and the PTPA. And so you really can't get anything done. It's tough. I don't have a definitive answer.
No, I don't either. I do think Novak's involvement is critical. I mean, if they didn't have someone of his stature, and granted, it would help him immensely if he had at least one of the other two joining him. He's just, I think, a little bit bolder politically and more willing to put himself on the line. They're more traditionalists in their way, Roger and Rafa. So he hasn't been able to bring them along, but somehow I think that this is not going to end up, that it's going to end up with a slightly reshaped ATP, that they're going to somehow merge it. And something's going to come out of it that way. I can't tell you how they're going to get there, but that's my guess, Steve, that something transpires in that way, where there's a compromise, but where Djokovic and the other, and Pospisil and the others feel like they're getting more what they've been asking for, which is more player power.
The other thing, in my opinion, you have to have the women involved. You can't just do it for the ATP. So, it carries. That's what makes tennis great, is the fact that 9 out of the 10 highest paid female athletes on the planet are tennis players. And the fact that Roger Federer, not this past year, but the year before that, was the highest paid athlete on the planet, is a tennis player. That's what makes our sport fantastic, that the highest paid athletes are tennis players, and that, especially on the women's side, like if you've got a daughter, get her into tennis, because that's where you're getting paid, right? So And the game to me is amazing at the highest level. Like there's a ton of women's matches that I'd rather watch than men's matches.
And this is a little bit different topic, and we're not going to address today. But when you say the money is so good up, it's obviously extremely top level. We all know that 100 in the world, 150 in the world, you are so good. 200 in the world, 300 in the world, you are so good. There's no money in that. The money is good. It's very top level, which is we all know.
It's also a meritocracy, right? So every year it starts. And everybody's got the same chance. So be the best, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like Steve Flink is in the Hall of Fame for a reason. Like there's a lot of writers out there that are really good, but like he was better. So, like just be the best. And, and
there's
that's decided on a court. There's no subjectivity to number one in the world.
Right.
It's what you do out there. So if you're number one, you can make a lot of money.
But briefly, David, just really quick. I think Steve's got a very good point. The women must be brought into this equation. And the issue came up last year with Djokovic, and he said they were going to be, they were reaching out to the women, but it doesn't appear that much
He said he talked to Serena. He said he did talk to Serena.
But it hasn't gone anywhere. And that's going to be critical too, if they really are going to move out on their own.
2 matches there. I got 2 more for you, and we're gonna end it up
real quick.
But 2 more, two matches that really just caught my eye, and they're both on the men's side here. In the first round matches, Sebastian Korda, who I know we're all so high on, plays Alex de Minaur in the first round. Also, a match that keeps staring me in the face: Struff versus Medvedev in the first round. Struff's been playing well. He's got a ton of talent. Those 2 matches are going to be fun to watch. I don't know who's going to win. I'm not here to pick. But those 2 matches, for some reason, seem really stood out to me. I'm looking forward to watching both of them.
I am too. I'm going with Korda and Medvedev to win those matches. I think that de Minaur had a great week. He's on a high, but I think Korda is going to. I somehow envision a 5-set win for Korda, and Medvedev I think is going to be ready for Struff this time, unlike their last meeting.
I'm with you, Steve. I'm a huge Sebi fan. He trained with Andre and Steffi over the summer, so he's Team Agassi. And his sister Nelly is tied for the lead in the LPGA event. I don't know what the score is right now. They were tied through 4 holes today. The Kardashians are amazing. That whole family, big fans, and I'm big on Sebi, so I would take him. And then another match that I'm really interested in is the Kvitova Sloane Stephens match.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah.
That to me is the biggest first round match on either side. I mean, you've got 2 Grand Slam champions, you've got a 2-time Wimbledon champion, and then Sloane, who, in my opinion, can literally win any tournament she enters if she wants to.
She's been struggling, but she's been playing better as of late. So it's been great to see her playing to the level where we all know she can play at. Last but not least, and we're going to let you go after this one. Is either of you confident saying that the end of Wimbledon, I mean, any chance the big 3, they're all not tied at 20 after this?
I'm saying it's tied. I do think that Medvedev, Steve, made an interesting comment about that Djokovic was driven by history, and he said it works in his favor and it works against him, in the sense that, he wants it so badly and he tends to bring out his best under the high pressure circumstances. On the other hand, the high pressure is there because everybody's making him such a clear favorite. But in the end, I still think he will deal with it. I think his draw is so good all the way to the semis, and then maybe Tsitsipas in the semis and Roger or Medvedev or whoever it is comes out of the other half of the draw. But I think he's got so much confidence having won the first 2 and priming for this and wanting to get to 20. I'm going with him. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a chance because there's, like anything else, there's always a chance. You never know what can happen out there. We didn't expect what happened at the US Open last year to happen. And just circling back to the PTPA thing quickly, that is something that is hovering out there that could be a factor at Wimbledon, at the Olympics, at the US Open. Again, I think a lot of that pressure and coming out and having to deal with all that boiled out onto the court when he hit that tennis ball in frustration.
Yeah.
Obviously, he didn't mean to do that, but those are the things. Djokovic, if he's healthy and mentally all there, should win. But you never know with what could be going on off court. And as I always like with Naomi Osaka, with anybody, you never know what anybody is truly going through at any point in their lives.
Very true.
And
All good.
And that's a big factor.
Yeah.
Now, I just quick addition to that, David, just a quick thing. And Steve brings up the US Open, and no doubt that was a chilling, absolutely agonizing moment for Djokovic to smack that ball and hit the lines and find himself out of the tournament. And that was with a lot of this talk about the other Players Association swirling around him then. I do think right now, I think he's going to keep it. I think he's going to really compartmentalize during this Wimbledon. He knows what happened to him in 16 when he lost to Sam Querrey in the third round, and with a chance to go for the Grand Slam that year. And I don't think he's going to allow that to happen again. And this time, I think he will sort things out. That's my guess.
Guys, as always, this is a blast. Steve Flink, you know how much I enjoy doing these episodes with you. And Steve Weissman, what a treat. I appreciate it. I know we went longer, a little bit longer than usual, but I appreciate you taking time and coming on and giving us your insight, and keep doing everything you're doing. We love watching you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Wimbledon primetime starts tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Myself, John Wertheim, Martina Navratilova on the desk. So we've got a combined 20 Wimbledon titles between the three of us on the desk.
There you go.
Thank you, Martina.
You're right there.
And then obviously Lindsay and Jim and Paul and Ted and Alex and the whole crew will be there, doing it for 2 weeks. So looking forward to the championships.
Well,
Thanks,
listen,
guys.
be watching, and Steve, thanks a lot. It was a great pleasure to exchange views with you today, and I think we agreed on just about everything.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can't disagree with the legend. So whatever you say goes. And it's always a pleasure to be able to catch up and chat with you. And thank you so much, literally, for having me on here and give me a chance to chat.
It was
Our
great.
pleasure. Talk soon, guys.
All right, take care.